This question has haunted aviation enthusiasts for years as they try to unravel the mystery surrounding the crash of Eastern Airlines Flight 401. What makes the story of Flight 401 even more mysterious is that there were no distress signals from the cockpit and no mayday calls to air traffic control. The plane was in a normal descent for its approach when suddenly it vanished from radar screens, leaving air traffic controllers baffled. The wreckage told a tale of absolute devastation. Of the 176 people on board, 75 survived, but 101 lives were tragically lost in the swampy wilderness. The crash site, scattered with debris and shrouded in the ghostly silence of the Everglades, bore silent witness to the terrible event. The crash of Eastern Airlines Flight 401 remains one of the most puzzling in aviation history. With clear weather, a nearly new plane, and no distress signals, the question remains, what could have caused such a disaster? It's a question that has captivated, confused, and frustrated aviation experts for years. Is it a human error, or it's just a technical malfunction struck one of the aircraft systems? The mystery of Flight 401's crash was just beginning to unfold. As we delve deeper into this chilling tale, we'll explore the series of events that led to this catastrophic crash and try to piece together the puzzle that is Eastern Airlines Flight 401. Flight 401 will change the way that pilots all over the world deal with things like teamwork and problem solving, which will lead to what's so-called Crew Resource Management (CRM). Stay tuned. Chapter 1. The Flight. On a seemingly ordinary evening of December 29, 1972, the skies over Florida were clear and calm. Eastern Airlines Flight 401, a nearly new Lockheed L-1011 TriStar, was en route from JFK International Airport, New York, JFK, to Miami International Airport, MIA, Miami. It was a routine flight, one of many that crisscrossed the country daily. But what was about to unfold was anything but routine. The Lockheed L-1011 TriStar was a marvel of its time. It was the epitome of aviation technology, boasting a state-of-the-art autopilot system, and had only been in service for a mere 4 months. A long-range variant of the wide-body airliner, FAA registration N310EA, serial number N193A10011, which had been delivered to Eastern Airlines on 18th August 1972, had entered service 3 days later. At the time of the crash, it had just 986 hours total flight time, TTAF. The L-1011 was a very technologically advanced airliner, operated by a flight crew of 3, and could carry a maximum of 330 passengers. This was a plane built to withstand the rigors of air travel with 3 engines, 2 on the wings and 1 in the back. It was quite complex back in '70, with an autopilot system that could do auto-land very much like the same system equipped in Boeing 737. The autopilot and one of the subsystem will play a vital role in the story later on. Chapter 2. The Crew. On board the TriStar were 163 passengers, holiday travelers, business people, and families, all eager to reach the warm tropical climate of Miami. 10 cabin crew members and 3 pilots. The crew of Flight 401 was an experienced one. In charge of the flight, Captain Robert Loft, a 55-year-old veteran, was a very experienced captain with over 30,000 hours of flight time. His co-pilot, First Officer Albert Stockstill, was a former U.S. Air Force pilot who had flown with Eastern as a flight engineer for 12 years before upgrading to First Officer the previous year. The second officer, flight engineer, was Donald Lewis Repo. He was employed as a mechanic by Eastern in 1947 and qualified as a flight engineer in 1955. Their combined experience and expertise made them a skilled team, capable of handling any situation. The flight proceeded smoothly, with the passengers settling in for their journey. Their combined experience and expertise made them a skilled team, capable of handling any situation. The flight proceeded smoothly, with the passengers settling in for their journey. Chapter 3. The Fateful Flight. The flight crew of TriStar. Flight 401 started their pre-flight preparation just as normal. The weather at the destination airport was nice. There were only same scattered clouds around some light easterly wind and clear visibility. First Officer Albert Stockstill was designated the pilot flying for the flight. At time 21:20 EST, they took off towards Miami. The crew expertly navigated the aircraft through the night sky, maintaining a comfortable cruising altitude. As they communicated with air traffic control, monitored their instruments, and made routine checks, everything seemed to be progressing as expected. During the flight, the pilots used the autopilot to relieve them from heavy workload. As we mentioned earlier, the autopilot on the TriStar is remarkably similar. For Boeing 737, it has two channels, A and B. Channel A, controlled by the captain's side. Channel B, controlled by first officer's side. Normally during the flight, one of the two channel activated and the other stand by. For sure, both channel can activated simultaneously if the pilots plan to make auto land. And to understand why this accident happened, you have to understand the basic modes for the autopilot. Let's start with the easy one. 1. Control wheel steering, CWS. In CWS mode, the pilot controls the autopilot through inputs on the control column or the stick. When pressure on the controls is released, the autopilot will maintain the roll or pitch command until another control column input instructs it to do otherwise. It's very simple and very rarely to use during normal operation. 2. Command mode, CMD. The autopilot is fully engaged and will command the aircraft to climb, descend, or maintain level flight depending upon pilot input via the Autopilot Control Panel, ACP, or the Flight Management Control Panel, FMS, commonly used during flight. As they neared Miami, the crew began their preparations for landing. The plane was to land on runway 09 left. They reduced their altitude, adjusted their speed, and started to lower the landing gear. But then, something unexpected occurred. The green light that usually illuminated to confirm the landing gear was down and locked didn't come on. Everything else seemed perfectly normal. All other instruments were reading correctly, and the aircraft was responding as it should. But the absence of this tiny light threw everything into uncertainty. Captain Loft got on the radio and said, "Well, Tower, this is Eastern 401. It looks like we're going to have to circle. We don't have a light on our nose gear yet." "Eastern 401 heavy, Roger," said the controller. "Pull up, climb straight ahead to 2000. Go back to approach control on 128.6. The plan was for Flight 401 to enter a holding pattern west of the airport at 2,000 feet, where it wouldn't interfere with other planes on approach. The crew decided to abort the landing and circle the airport while they investigated the issue. The atmosphere in the cockpit shifted from routine to tense as they focused their attention on the unlit bulb. Flight engineer Don Rapo chimed in with a suggestion. "You want me to test the lights or not?" he asked. At the flight engineer's station, there was a button that would allow him to perform a so-called Christmas tree test, illuminating every light in the cockpit to determine if the bulb had burnt out. "Yeah," said Loft. "Check it." Repo flipped the Christmas tree switch, and all the cockpit lights came on, except for the nose gear light. Bob, it might be the light," said Stockstill. "Could you jiggle that? The light?" They were so engrossed in this anomaly, so absorbed in troubleshooting this small piece of technology, that they didn't notice something crucial. The crew's attention was so focused on a tiny bulb that they didn't realize their plane was slowly descending. This seemingly insignificant light would set the stage for one of the most perplexing and tragic incidents in aviation history. Chapter 4. The Distraction. It was the landing gear light, the one that signals whether the wheels were safely locked in place for landing. This light was a small but crucial part of the vast array of instruments that pilots rely on to navigate the skies. It was designed to be a steadfast beacon, a reassurance that the plane was ready to touch down. But on this fateful night, it was a source of uncertainty, a nagging question mark in the sea of routine checks and balances. The crew, experienced and professional, was not about to take any chances. They began troubleshooting, their attention drawn to the flickering light like a moth to a flame. They examined the bulb, checked the circuits, and debated possible reasons for the anomaly. All the while, the drone of the engines and the hum of the plane's systems were their constant companions, a symphony of normalcy that masked a creeping danger. Captain Loft decided that they had wasted enough time messing with the bulb. He turned around and said to Repo, Hey, get down there and see if that damn nose wheel is down. You better do that." Although it was inconvenient, there was one way to confirm the position of the gear without relying on the light bulb. Beneath the cockpit floor was the avionics bay, a cramped room colloquially known as the hellhole, which could be accessed via a hatch in the cockpit floor. Inside the hellhole, there was a small window providing a view of two pins on the nose gear mechanism. If they were aligned with a red bar, then the gear was locked. At around this time, Stock still observed that they were a little bit too fast and made a slight power reduction. What he didn't know was that the autopilot would not compensate for this drop in power by using the controls to keep the plane at 2,000 feet. With less power and nothing to counteract it, Flight 401 entered a shallow descent. Unbeknownst to the crew, the autopilot, their silent co-pilot, had been accidentally disengaged during Captain Loft movement, or else. Unlike earlier models, the L-1011's autopilot had more possible configurations than just on or off. Instead, pilots could set it to control any combination of the various vectors of motion that they so desired. To allow the pilots to quickly take control from the autopilot in an emergency, each of these components could be selectively disabled by making a sufficiently forceful input in its respective plane of motion, using the control column. Like a feather on the wind, it was descending so gently, so subtly, that it went unnoticed. They were so focused, so determined to solve this minor issue, that they missed the silent warnings of their descent. The altimeter's needle was dropping, and the horizon on their instruments was tilting, but their eyes were fixed on the flickering light. The irony is chilling. A crew of skilled aviators, trained to handle the most challenging situations, was being undone by a simple light bulb. They were so caught up in a minor detail that they were missing the bigger picture. The plane was falling, and they were running out of time. Chapter 5. The Crash. In the cockpit of Eastern Airlines Flight 401, the atmosphere was tense. The crew was embroiled in confusion. They were trying to fix a minor issue, a malfunctioning landing gear indicator light, but in doing so, they had unknowingly drifted off course. The altimeter, a device measuring the aircraft's altitude, was dropping at an alarming rate, but it went unnoticed. The crew's attention was focused elsewhere, on a tiny bulb that refused to light up, a small distraction that was about to have catastrophic consequences. And then it happened. The sudden realization that the plane was descending too fast, too low. The chilling words from the flight engineer, "We're still at 2,000, right?" echoed in the cockpit. The captain, absorbed in the issue at hand, responded absent-mindedly. "What?" The flight engineer's voice grew more urgent. "We're still at 2,000 feet, right?" But it was too late. The ground proximity alarm blared a shrill warning that echoed too late. The Everglades were waiting, a dark, unforgiving expanse of water and marshland. The impact was devastating. The Lockheed L-1011 TriStar, a marvel of modern engineering, was no match for the unforgiving swamp. The plane, once soaring high, was now a mangled wreck, half submerged in the murky waters of the Everglades. The silence that followed was eerie, a stark contrast to the chaos just moments before. The immediate aftermath was a scene of utter devastation. Rescue efforts were hampered by the remoteness of the crash site and the treacherous terrain. The few survivors were in a state of shock, their minds struggling to comprehend the magnitude of the disaster. The crash of Eastern Airlines Flight 401 was a stark reminder of how a simple distraction can lead to a catastrophe, a tragic example of how the smallest oversight can have the most devastating consequences. Chapter 6. The Investigation and Findings. The crash site, a watery grave, was littered with wreckage, the remnants of Eastern Airlines Flight 401. The formidable task was to reconstruct the sequence of events that led to the tragic end of this fateful flight. The wreckage was submerged, making it even more difficult to retrieve and examine. It was an arduous process, but the investigators were relentless. As they pieced together the shattered remnants of the aircraft, a chilling picture began to emerge, a tale of human error compounded by a minor technical glitch. The crew had been so engrossed in a malfunctioning landing gear indicator light that they failed to monitor their altitude. The autopilot had been accidentally disengaged, and the plane slowly descended into the dark abyss of the Everglades. The National Transportation Safety Board's final report concluded that the crash was caused by the crew's failure to monitor the altitude while dealing with a minor technical issue. The focus on the indicator light had drawn their attention away from the vital task of maintaining the plane's altitude. It was a tragic irony. A minor issue with a landing gear light bulb, a piece of equipment worth only a few dollars, had led to the loss of 101 lives. It highlighted the importance of maintaining focus and vigilance in the cockpit, even when dealing with seemingly minor issues. It's a lesson that continues to resonate in the aviation industry, serving as a grim reminder of the potential consequences of losing focus, even for a moment. Thanks for sticking with this video till the very end. If you enjoyed this video and wish to see more of such videos, please subscribe to this channel. Also, remember to like and share this video content. Thanks again for watching.